Can you imagine waking up one morning to a message that changes everything? A single sentence that rips the world you thought you knew right out from under you? For Prince Harry, that moment came not with the gentle tapping of a letter slid under a door, nor with a whisper from an ally, but in a way that the entire world would witness. An announcement so shocking, so final, that it felt like the monarchy itself had shifted beneath its foundation. You're no longer my wife. 3 words. Simple. But when Harry spoke them, or when the world first caught wind of them, the echo reverberated far beyond the palace walls, ricocheting through social media, newspapers, and the hearts of millions who had followed this couple's every step. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Think about that sentence for a moment. You're no longer my wife. Those words carry weight. They carry betrayal. They carry heartbreak. They carry history. And yet, there's something even more confounding about them. Something that makes you lean closer, strain your ears, your eyes glued to every headline, every whispered rumor, every leaked message. Because in those words is a story the world was never supposed to see. A story that, until now, remained tightly locked behind closed doors, hidden in the corridors of palaces, in hushed conversations, in the flashing cameras of the paparazzi that never sleep. And it wasn't just a divorce. Not in the ordinary sense of the word. We are talking about two of the most scrutinized, most publicized individuals on the planet. Individuals whose lives are dissected under the microscope of fame, wealth, and royalty. Every smile, every gesture, every seemingly insignificant glance is analyzed, shared, and judged. And when the announcement came, it wasn't simply a private heartbreak. It was a public spectacle of monumental proportions. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to live every day knowing that your personal life is everyone else's entertainment? Harry and Meghan were living that reality, and then it all cracked wide open. But let's rewind for a moment. Before the shock, before the headlines screamed across the globe, there was a quiet tension simmering beneath the polished appearances and the carefully curated Instagram posts. The world saw a couple in love. They saw hand-in-hand appearances at charity events, royal tours across the globe, warm smiles for the cameras, and speeches that emphasized unity, purpose, and family. The world adored them. The press loved them. Even the royal family, for all its traditions and formalities, seemed cautiously supportive. But behind the curtain, whispers had begun to stir. Private disagreements, subtle cold shoulders, small cracks in the public facade that, when pieced together, formed the outline of something much darker. Some might call it inevitable. When two people live under the scrutiny of the world, when every interaction is documented and every moment is dissected, pressure builds. But what happened in this case was different. It wasn't just the public eye. It wasn't just the endless commentary or the paparazzi lurking at every corner. No, there were deeper forces at play, forces rooted in family dynamics, history, power, and, yes, betrayal. And the announcement, when it finally came, wasn't just a personal statement. It was a seismic tremor that shook the monarchy, the media, and the millions who had invested emotionally in this couple. You have to ask yourself, how did it get to this point? How does a marriage, celebrated and admired by millions, suddenly reach a point where a public divorce is not only necessary, but unavoidable? Was it a single incident, a final straw that broke the camel's back? Or was it a slow burn, a tension building over years, hidden behind smiles and speeches, only to explode into a story that no one saw coming? The truth, of course, is somewhere in between. And over the course of this story, we're going to uncover it all. Every secret, every shock, every moment that led to the moment that stunned the world. Let's start with the early days, shall we? Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage, at least on the surface, seemed like a fairy tale. The wedding itself was a spectacle unlike any other in recent royal history. Tens of millions watched as Meghan walked down the aisle, radiant in white, Harry waiting anxiously at the altar. It was a moment of global admiration, a celebration of love against the backdrop of centuries-old traditions. The headlines called it a modern royal romance, a break from convention, a union of charisma, charm, and influence. And for a while, it seemed that way. The public adored them. The press wrote endless features. Social media buzzed with memes, admiration, and speculation. But every story has layers. Behind the smiles, there were undercurrents of tension. Reports of disagreements, miscommunications, and struggles with family expectations began to surface. Some dismissed them as rumors, others as misunderstandings. But when pieced together with hindsight, these moments began to form a pattern, one that hinted at the coming storm. It wasn't about a single fight or a passing argument. It was about fundamental differences in perspective, in expectation, in coping with an unprecedented life in the spotlight. And it was about power, influence, and the fragility of human emotion under pressure. Now, imagine living in that pressure cooker. Every decision scrutinized, every misstep amplified, every private disagreement potentially leaked to the world. That's the world Harry and Meghan inhabited, and it's a world most of us can barely comprehend. How does one navigate love when every gesture, every glance, every word can become public property? How do you maintain privacy, sanity, and intimacy when the cameras never turn off and the media never sleeps? And yet, somehow, they did it for a time. Somehow, they maintained a public facade of unity, of love, of resilience. But nothing lasts forever. And then came the tipping point. A moment so significant, so seismic, that it would forever redefine their relationship, and, in turn, the perception of the monarchy itself. The details of that tipping point are what we're going to explore in the chapters ahead. We'll dive into the private meetings, the heated conversations, the leaked texts, and the moments of heartbreak that led Harry to make a decision that would shock the world. And we'll explore Meghan's side as well, because this is not a one-sided story. This is a tale of two lives, two perspectives, two people navigating an impossible situation under impossible scrutiny. The world thinks it knows what happened. Headlines scream betrayal, power struggles, and heartbreak. Social media explodes with opinions, memes, and hashtags. But the truth is far more intricate, far more emotional, and far more human than anything you've seen in print or on a screen. In the chapters ahead, we'll peel back the layers, uncover the secrets, and reveal the truth behind the announcement that "You're no longer my wife" is not just a statement. It is a story. A story of love, betrayal, pressure, resilience, and the unrelenting gaze of the world. By the end of this journey, you will see how public image and private reality can collide in the most dramatic, heartbreaking, and jaw-dropping ways imaginable. You'll understand why this moment matters, not just for Harry and Meghan, but for anyone who has ever struggled with expectations, pressure, and the weight of the world's gaze. And perhaps most importantly, you'll realize that sometimes the most shocking events are not the ones the cameras capture, but the ones that unfold behind the scenes, in whispers, in texts, in closed rooms where decisions are made that will ripple across the globe. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever sensed a storm before it hits? The eerie quiet, the subtle tension in the air, the way the leaves stop moving, and even the birds seem to pause, holding their breath. That's how the early days of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage began, a calm that felt comforting, yet carried a hidden tension. From the outside, it looked perfect. Royal smiles, glowing appearances, carefully curated gestures. But for those who knew, the quiet was deceptive. It was the calm before a storm that no one, not even the most seasoned palace observers, could have predicted. In the beginning, Harry and Meghan seemed like a modern fairy tale. Their first public appearances as a couple radiated warmth and charm. They were energetic, full of promise, and undeniably captivating. Harry, the prince who had always battled the press, now seemed lighter, happier, in love. Meghan, the actress stepping into a world steeped in centuries-old tradition, appeared confident, ready to embrace the role of a royal, but also determined to maintain her individuality. Together, they seemed unstoppable. But as anyone who's lived a long-term relationship knows, appearances can be deceptive. The cracks began subtly. It wasn't one grand fight, not at first. It was small things, differing approaches to public appearances, subtle disagreements on how to interact with the press, the kind of miscommunications that seem minor until they pile up. Imagine two people from entirely different worlds, one accustomed to Hollywood glare, the other raised amidst centuries of royal tradition, trying to navigate marriage under the intense scrutiny of millions. Differences that might have been trivial elsewhere became magnified, sometimes painfully so. Even their friends noticed. Close confidants observed tension in private gatherings. Smiles that seemed warm on camera were often accompanied by tense body language behind the scenes, hands fidgeting, half smiles, eyes that flicked nervously. Was this what true happiness looked like? Could a couple maintain love when the entire world was watching every moment, analyzing every gesture, and speculating endlessly about their private lives? One of the earliest signs of trouble came during a royal tour. The couple was scheduled to visit several high-profile locations, meet dignitaries, and give speeches that would be broadcast globally. On paper, everything was perfect, but behind the scenes, the schedule was grueling. Tensions over how each event was handled began to surface. Meghan preferred more informal engagements that allowed her to connect personally with people, while Harry was mindful of tradition and protocol. Small disagreements, repeated over days, built pressure. Imagine traveling across continents, living out of suitcases, constantly monitored, and knowing that the tiniest misstep could be reported worldwide. It's exhausting, it's isolating, and it's a pressure few can imagine. The media, of course, noticed the slightest slip. Tabloids dissected every expression, every gesture, every choice of attire. Headlines hinted at tension, rumors began to swirl, and suddenly a minor disagreement could be blown into a global story. The couple's private struggles were no longer private, they were public fodder. How would you feel if the world analyzed your love life daily? Every argument you had could be framed as betrayal, manipulation, or scandal. The weight of expectation is immense. Yet, in spite of the growing tension, there were moments of genuine connection. Private dinners, quiet conversations, fleeting moments where the world seemed to disappear. They laughed, shared dreams, and showed vulnerability only to each other. But those moments were fleeting. The reality of constant surveillance, judgment, and expectation always returned, like a tide that erodes even the strongest foundations. And as these pressures mounted, the calm before the storm began to feel less like tranquility and more like a warning. Friends and insiders described the early years as a delicate balancing act. Harry wanted to support Meghan's ambitions, her desire to modernize and reshape aspects of royal life, while still honoring tradition. Meghan wanted independence and freedom, the ability to advocate for causes close to her heart, and the space to navigate her new life on her own terms. Sometimes, these goals aligned beautifully. Other times, they clashed spectacularly. The palace, after all, is not a forgiving environment. There are rules, expectations, and centuries of unspoken pressures that weigh heavily on everyone, especially someone who is new to the fold. Even small decisions could spark conflict. A choice of clothing for a public appearance, the scheduling of a charitable event, the wording of a public statement, all became arenas for debate. Each disagreement left residual tension. Each unspoken frustration compounded. Imagine the strain. Trying to live authentically while constantly performing, balancing love and duty, and knowing that every misstep could be broadcast worldwide. It's no wonder that small frictions began to grow into larger cracks. And then there were the family dynamics. Harry, while deeply loyal to his family, had long struggled with the intense scrutiny and sometimes the criticism that comes with being a royal. Meghan, entering this world from a very different background, faced a culture shock unlike anything most people experience. She had to learn protocols, navigate expectations, and do so while under constant public observation. Misunderstandings were inevitable. Frustrations simmered, and quietly, the tension began to mount between what they wanted as a couple and what the institution expected of them. These early tensions set the stage for what was to come. It wasn't dramatic yet. There were no public fights, no viral scandals. Just a quiet accumulation of stress, subtle disagreements, and a growing sense that living under the microscope was changing them. Relationships are complicated under normal circumstances, but under extraordinary pressure, even the strongest bonds can be tested to the breaking point. And this couple, as beloved as they were, was about to face a challenge unlike any other: reconciling love, personal freedom, and public expectation in a world that offered no privacy, no room for mistakes, and no respite from constant judgment. The calm before the storm is deceptive. It lulls you into a false sense of security, into believing that the peace you see is real. For Harry and Meghan, that calm would not last. Every choice, every comment, every appearance was quietly shaping the trajectory of their marriage. And when the first real rupture occurred, the shockwaves would be felt far beyond their private lives. The storm had been building, invisible yet inexorable, until the first gusts of conflict began to tear through their world. And the whispers started. Small hints of disagreement, subtle but telling, started to leak into the press. Rumors of tension between Harry and Meghan's differing approaches, of friction over family interactions, of subtle clashes in public appearances. They all began to form a narrative that was invisible to the casual observer but unmistakable to those paying attention. The calm was over. The storm was approaching. And soon, the world would witness the unraveling of a relationship that had once seemed untouchable. But what came next would ignite a firestorm the likes of which no one could have predicted. What happens when the cameras stop rolling? When the flashing lights fade, the headlines vanish, and the world's gaze is temporarily lifted? Most people assume that public figures, especially royalty, retreat into calm, controlled environments behind palace doors. But for Harry and Meghan, those private spaces were anything but calm. Behind the gilded walls, behind the perfectly polished appearances, a different reality was unfolding. A reality full of tension, frustration, and emotions that the world would never see unless leaks or whispers reached the press. The palace is a world of rules, hierarchy, and centuries of unspoken expectations. And while the public sees pageantry and tradition, inside those walls lies a complex web of relationships, protocols, and pressures that would strain even the most seasoned individual. For Harry and Meghan, this world was both a stage and a trap. Every decision, every word, every interaction, even in private, was scrutinized by those who lived within the palace system. And when personal desires clashed with institutional expectations, the friction could be intense. Let's start with Harry. For years, he had walked a delicate line between duty and personal freedom. He adored his family, respected tradition, and understood the weight of his title. But he also had a deep desire to protect the people he loved, to shield them from the same scrutiny and pain he had endured after the loss of his mother. Meghan, with her own career, passions, and independent spirit, was entering a world that was not just unfamiliar, but often unwelcoming. Harry's challenge became balancing loyalty to his family and institution with loyalty to his wife, and the two often collided in ways that left both of them frustrated. Meghan's position was complicated. She had grown accustomed to independence, to making choices freely, and to shaping her own path. Suddenly, every action had a consequence, every word a ripple effect across the media and the monarchy. Protocol dictated her behavior in ways that sometimes felt arbitrary or stifling. Private conversations about what she could or could not do, how she should dress, and when she could speak publicly became sources of tension. Small disagreements over seemingly trivial matters. What engagement to attend, how to handle press inquiries, even the phrasing of official statements, began to accumulate. Imagine the strain of walking through a hallway in your own home, aware that every room has eyes, and every corridor has whispers. Staff, advisors, and palace aides, though often loyal, represent the rules and expectations of an institution older than most nations. They interpret every interaction, every disagreement, every small argument. And when Meghan and Harry sought privacy, they sometimes found themselves navigating layers of protocols and opinions, each one quietly influencing their personal choices. Some of the tension came from communication differences. Meghan, accustomed to directness, often found the indirect, formal communication of palace staff frustrating. Harry, trained to mediate and manage conflicts delicately, sometimes found himself caught between defending his wife and respecting the institution he had grown up in. Small arguments escalated, not because of anger, but because of misunderstanding, compounded by constant external pressures. It's important to understand that private disagreements in this context are not typical. When the public sees a couple bickering on the street or on social media, it's usually isolated and temporary. For Harry and Meghan, these moments were amplified by the environment. Disagreements over scheduling could quickly spiral into emotional debates because they carried weight beyond the couple. They implicated protocol, public perception, and family expectations. And when the stress built up over time, even minor conflicts could feel catastrophic. The media, of course, had no way of seeing these private battles directly, but they could sense them. Subtle shifts in tone during interviews, small pauses in speeches, and fleeting expressions in photographs were all scrutinized and interpreted as signs of tension. Rumors began to circulate, some accurate, some exaggerated, and soon the public began to speculate about cracks in the marriage long before anything official was revealed. Insiders later revealed that some of the most intense arguments took place behind closed doors late at night, when the pressure of the day had finally lifted and both Harry and Meghan were exhausted. Emotional exhaustion, combined with the weight of responsibility, made conversations fraught with frustration. Conflicts that might have been resolved calmly in a normal household instead escalated into intense discussions, fueled by fear, insecurity, and the knowledge that any misstep could become public knowledge. There were also strategic disagreements. Harry wanted to protect Meghan, to shield her from the relentless press and the institutional pressures he knew all too well. Meghan, on the other hand, wanted to assert herself, to push back against the rules she found stifling. The result was a recurring tension between protection and autonomy. Harry's desire to navigate the system carefully sometimes conflicted with Meghan's desire to act independently. These were not petty disputes. They were fundamental differences in how to survive and even thrive within a royal life. One story stands out from this period: a private meeting in one of the palace's quieter wings. Staff were instructed to leave the couple alone, and for a moment, it seemed like Harry and Meghan could speak freely. What was meant to be a calm, constructive conversation quickly became heated. Reports from insiders describe a mix of frustration, hurt feelings, and raw honesty. Words were exchanged that revealed deep insecurities, unspoken resentments, and fears about the future. For Harry, it was the constant struggle to balance family loyalty with marital loyalty. For Meghan, it was the battle to assert her identity within a system that was inherently resistant to change. The conversation ended unresolved, leaving both shaken. And these private battles were not isolated incidents. They became a pattern. Arguments over scheduling, public appearances, family interactions, and even simple personal choices accumulated, each leaving a residue of tension. Imagine a pressure cooker with no release valve, simmering quietly for months or years. Eventually, the energy had to find an outlet, and when it did, the result would be explosive. Meanwhile, the palace hierarchy watched closely. Advisors and staff were in the difficult position of mediating between the couple and the institution. Their goal was to maintain order, to protect the monarchy's image, and to prevent conflicts from spilling into public view. But this often meant that the couple felt misunderstood or constrained, increasing the emotional distance between them. The very system designed to support them sometimes felt like a cage, intensifying the private battles. Meghan's friends noted that she often felt isolated, unable to fully express her frustrations without fear of judgment or misinterpretation. Harry, for his part, was torn between defending his wife and respecting the rules of an institution he had known all his life. The emotional toll was immense. Arguments that might have been minor in any other household became seismic events in this environment. Both were trapped between love, loyalty, duty, and personal happiness. And as the tension built, small cracks in the public facade began to appear. During interviews, their smiles sometimes faltered. During appearances, there were fleeting moments of visible discomfort. The world saw perfection, but perfection was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. Rumors began to grow, and the speculation intensified. The private battles behind palace doors were shaping the trajectory of the marriage in ways that would eventually lead to the world-shaking announcement. The calm before the storm had ended, and now, the quiet pressure was giving way to undeniable conflict. Choices made in these private moments, decisions spoken in hushed tones behind closed doors, would determine not just the future of their relationship, but the future of their public lives. And yet, even amid these struggles, moments of tenderness remained. Private jokes, small gestures of affection, quiet reassurances. These flashes of love were reminders of why the relationship had begun in the first place. But they were fleeting, fragile, and often overshadowed by the pressures of duty, expectation, and scrutiny. The battle between personal happiness and public obligation was intensifying, and neither could fully escape it. The cracks were no longer just whispers, they were widening. And when the first major public rupture occurred, the consequences would be felt far beyond the palace walls. But what happened next would push the couple to the brink, and the world would be watching every second. The world thinks it sees everything. Headlines, paparazzi photos, viral clips, social media commentary. It all creates the illusion that nothing escapes public view. But sometimes, the cracks in a relationship are so subtle, so carefully hidden, that they simmer quietly behind smiles, handshakes, and polished appearances. Until one day they don't. Until one small moment, captured by a lens or leaked by an insider, forces private tensions into the harsh glare of public scrutiny. That's exactly what happened with Harry and Meghan. The private battles behind palace doors had been escalating, but now the rift began to seep out, and the world was about to witness it firsthand. It started with small indicators, almost imperceptible at first. Observers noticed slight differences in their body language during official appearances. Where there once had been unity, now there were micro-expressions of discomfort, half smiles, subtle gestures, or the way one might glance away just a second too long. At royal events, seating arrangements, hand-holding, and even the timing of entrances became fodder for speculation. Could a single glance betray tension? Could a pause in conversation hint at something more serious? For the world, every small detail mattered, and soon, speculation turned into headlines. Then came the interviews. Harry and Meghan were no strangers to the media, but now, journalists and commentators began to parse their words for hidden meanings. A slight hesitation in an answer, a careful choice of phrasing, even an offhand comment was scrutinized. Was Meghan hinting at frustration with palace traditions? Was Harry subtly signaling a desire for more autonomy? The public, accustomed to seeing royalty as symbols of perfection, began to sense something was wrong. And once the world's eye landed on that sense of unease, there was no turning back. One of the most revealing moments occurred during a high-profile charity event. They were supposed to present a united front, smiling for cameras, shaking hands with dignitaries, and delivering speeches with seamless coordination. Instead, small misalignments became impossible to ignore. Meghan adjusted her posture mid-photo. Harry looked away at unexpected intervals, and for the first time, even casual observers noticed the tension. Social media exploded. Within hours, headlines speculated about disagreements, distance, and cracks in the relationship. What had been private for months was now being interpreted publicly, and every nuance was magnified tenfold. It's important to understand why this mattered. For most couples, disagreements remain private. They exist in the bedroom, over dinner, or during a walk. For Harry and Meghan, there was no room for privacy. The palace is a stage, the press is relentless, and the public is invested emotionally in every gesture. The consequences of a perceived slight or disagreement are global. And as the rift began to show, the couple faced a new kind of pressure. The need to not only manage their relationship, but also to control the narrative surrounding it. Insiders describe arguments that had previously been confined to private corridors suddenly finding their way into public discourse. Leaks from staff, intentional or not, painted a picture of a couple struggling under the weight of expectations. Tabloids ran stories of friction, gossip blogs speculated about arguments over family duties, and social media users debated which spouse was in the right. The palace was suddenly a microcosm of global scrutiny, with every minor detail dissected endlessly. Imagine living under such constant judgment. How could any argument remain private? The emotional toll was significant. Harry, who had long fought to protect Meghan from invasive media coverage, now had to face the irony that even the moments he tried hardest to contain were being analyzed publicly. Meghan, navigating a culture she was still learning, felt both misunderstood and under siege. Their private frustrations were no longer confined to their home. They were public property, discussed, debated, and dissected worldwide. Every interaction became a statement, every smile a symbol, every disagreement a headline. One particularly telling incident occurred during a royal family gathering, which was meant to celebrate tradition and continuity. From the outside, it looked perfect: coordinated outfits, polite conversation, and laughter captured in official photographs. But insiders later revealed tension under the surface. Seating arrangements became a subtle battleground. Conversations that seemed casual were, in reality, fraught with unspoken negotiations about how much autonomy Meghan could exercise and how much Harry could push against expectation. When photos leaked, the public noticed what insiders had been feeling for months, a subtle but unmistakable distance between the couple. By now, rumors were spreading like wildfire. Social media amplified every observation, turning micro-expressions into supposed scandals. Commentators debated endlessly about the meaning of gestures, phrases, and interactions. What was once a private struggle had now become a global story. The pressure intensified. Every appearance was no longer just an obligation. It was a test of endurance. How do you smile convincingly when your marriage is under stress? How do you deliver speeches and maintain composure when every move is scrutinized? For Harry and Meghan, the stakes were immense, and the world had become an unrelenting observer. It wasn't just public appearances that revealed the rift. Even philanthropic endeavors, meant to highlight unity and shared purpose, began to reflect underlying tension. Differences in approach became more visible. Meghan's initiatives sometimes clashed with traditional expectations, and Harry's attempts to mediate only occasionally succeeded. In private, arguments continued. In public, there were only subtle cues, a frown here, a pause there, a phrase carefully chosen to avoid escalation. The tension was like a slow leak in a pressurized vessel, invisible at first, but inevitable. The media coverage fueled the strain further. Every story, every speculation, every analysis increased the emotional burden. Friends and family, aware of the leaks, found themselves caught in difficult positions, trying to support the couple while also navigating their own roles within the institution. The palace hierarchy struggled to maintain order to prevent further public perception of discord, but even the most experienced advisors could not stop the subtle erosion of unity. And yet, amid all this, Harry and Meghan tried to maintain composure. They continued appearances, speeches, and engagements. They smiled for the cameras, shook hands with dignitaries, and maintained the illusion of normalcy. But illusions are fragile. The cracks widened. Observers noticed, rumors spread, and private battles now had public consequences. The rift had gone from whispers behind palace doors to a story that could not be contained. The tension reached a point where even casual observers began to question the stability of their marriage. Headlines speculated about disagreements over roles, responsibilities, and family relationships. Social media exploded with theories, memes, and debates about who was right and who was wrong. The private struggles had now transformed into a public spectacle, and the emotional toll on both Harry and Meghan was mounting. And then came the leaks, text messages, insider accounts, and subtle hints that confirmed what the public had only suspected. The world saw glimpses of arguments, tensions, and frustrations that had been hidden for months. Suddenly, the private battles were no longer hidden, and the couple's personal lives became a story that everyone felt they had the right to dissect and debate. But even as the media frenzy intensified, the couple remained determined to maintain some control over their narrative. They knew that the world was watching, and they had to navigate the delicate balance between privacy, duty, and personal happiness. Every public appearance became a calculated act, every statement a strategic move, and every interaction a careful negotiation between love and expectation. Yet, despite all their efforts, the rift was now undeniable. The world had glimpsed cracks that were impossible to ignore, and public speculation reached a fever pitch. Friends, family, and advisors understood that this was no longer a private matter. The tension had spilled into the public domain, and there was no turning back. And as the story continued to unfold, the world would soon witness events that were even more shocking. Events that would transform the perception of the royal couple and set the stage for an announcement that no one could have anticipated. But what happened next would uncover secrets and betrayals that the public had never imagined, and it would bring the storm to the surface. Some secrets are never meant to be shared. They are whispered in hallways, tucked into letters, or discussed quietly over a cup of tea. They linger in the spaces between words, in glances that speak volumes, in the heavy silences that follow a conversation. For Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, those secrets had been piling up behind palace walls for months, maybe even years. And then, slowly, inevitably, they began to leak. The first hints were subtle. A line in an interview here, a passing comment to a friend there. But as anyone who follows the royal world knows, even the smallest detail has the power to ignite a media frenzy. What was intended to remain private, small frustrations, disagreements, personal grievances, began to surface in ways that neither Harry nor Meghan could control. And once the information escaped, it spread like wildfire. Leaked messages played a crucial role in shaping public perception. Some were harmless misunderstandings, trivial disagreements blown out of proportion by eager reporters. Others were more revealing, texts and emails that hinted at deeper conflicts, expressions of frustration, and even moments of fear. One leaked exchange, reported by multiple insiders, suggested that Meghan felt isolated and unsupported in her early days within the palace. She reportedly confided to a close friend that she struggled with the rigid rules, the constant scrutiny, and the feeling that her voice was not being heard. Harry, for his part, was caught in the middle. Loyal to his family, protective of Meghan, and conscious of the legacy of his title, he faced pressure from all sides. The leaks portrayed him as both a mediator and a frustrated partner, someone trying to hold together a marriage while navigating the suffocating constraints of royalty. Public perception of his role varied. Some praised his attempts to protect Meghan, others criticized him for failing to maintain harmony within the palace. The combination of media coverage and leaked information created a perfect storm. Every new detail was amplified, dissected, and analyzed. Commentators debated the significance of each revelation, questioning motives, intentions, and loyalties. Social media users jumped into the fray, offering their own theories and judgments. The couple's private struggles were no longer private. They were now public narrative, with everyone feeling entitled to an opinion. The leaks weren't always intentional. Some came from staff members, unintentionally revealing information in casual conversations that made its way into the press. Others were more deliberate, meant to influence public perception or apply pressure on the couple. The palace itself, with its complex hierarchy and network of advisors, became both a source of protection and a source of exposure. Every ally, every staff member, every acquaintance had the potential to reveal something, whether by accident or design. One particularly damaging leak involved internal palace correspondence. Documents detailing disagreements over scheduling, travel plans, and public appearances were obtained by reporters. These communications painted a picture of a couple struggling to align their personal desires with institutional expectations. The public read about conflicts that, until that moment, had been confined to private discussions. Suddenly, the narrative shifted from speculation to evidence, and the intensity of scrutiny escalated dramatically. The impact of these leaks on Meghan was profound. Friends report that she felt betrayed, frustrated, and increasingly vulnerable. Every leak seemed to confirm her fears that the palace could not be trusted with her personal life. Every headline seemed to amplify the sense of isolation. The scrutiny was relentless, and the pressure was immense. Imagine living under such conditions, where even your most private thoughts and feelings could become global headlines overnight. It is an extraordinary burden, one that would test the strength of any relationship. Harry, too, faced an impossible balancing act. He wanted to defend his wife and preserve their privacy, yet the leaks forced him to respond, often publicly, to narratives that were already taking hold. His attempts to manage the situation were complicated by his loyalty to his family, his role as a prince, and the ever-present media attention. It was a delicate, exhausting dance, with consequences for every misstep. And then there were the rumors, wild, speculative, sometimes contradictory. The media thrives on uncertainty, and when information is scarce, it fills the gaps with conjecture. Friends of the couple reported feeling powerless as unverified claims circulated, painting Harry and Meghan in ways that didn't always reflect reality. One day, a report would suggest conflict over a minor event. The next, a story would claim that the marriage was on the brink of collapse. For the couple, separating truth from fiction became a daily struggle. Amid all this, the palace was not silent. Advisors attempted to manage the fallout, issue clarifications, and contain the leaks. But the more they tried to control the narrative, the more intense the public fascination became. Every statement, every denial, Every clarification only fueled further speculation. It was a paradox. The more the institution sought to maintain order, the more the cracks in the narrative were exposed. And yet, despite the leaks, the couple continued to fulfill their public duties. They attended engagements, met dignitaries, and maintained appearances for the cameras. But behind closed doors, the reality was starkly different. Arguments continued, frustrations mounted, and the sense of isolation grew. The palace, meant to be a place of security, increasingly felt like a trap. And the leaks were relentless reminders of that fact. Insiders described moments of extreme tension. Private conversations, once safe spaces for honesty and connection, became fraught with anxiety. The fear that another message, another comment, another interaction might be exposed at any moment added layers of stress and complexity to the relationship. Trust, which is fundamental to any partnership, was constantly tested. Who could be relied upon? Who might inadvertently or intentionally reveal a private matter? These questions loomed over Harry and Meghan, influencing decisions, conversations, and even emotional responses. The leaks also reshaped public perception. Initially, the world viewed the couple through the lens of admiration and celebrity intrigue. But as more information emerged, the narrative shifted. Headlines focused on tension, speculation about personal conflicts, and the challenges of balancing individual desires with institutional expectations. Social media amplified every nuance, every leak, every rumor. Public opinion became polarized. Some sympathized with Meghan, viewing her as a modern woman navigating an outdated system. Others criticized her, claiming she was disruptive or difficult. Harry, too, was caught in the crossfire, both praised and vilified for his attempts to mediate and protect. Amid the chaos, small victories and moments of respite provided temporary relief. The couple would find brief moments of privacy, brief escapes from the constant scrutiny. But these moments were fleeting. The pattern of leaks, speculation, and public attention ensured that any sense of normalcy was temporary. The private battles and the public consequences were now intertwined, creating a cycle that was increasingly difficult to break. And then came the most shocking revelations, details of conflicts and disagreements that went beyond minor disputes or scheduling issues. Insiders hinted at deep-seated frustrations, long-standing resentments, and incidents that had been carefully hidden from public view. These revelations painted a picture of a relationship under immense strain, where love and loyalty were constantly tested by the pressures of fame, tradition, and public expectation. The leaks forced Harry and Meghan to confront uncomfortable truths. They had to assess the sustainability of their marriage under such relentless scrutiny. They had to evaluate whether the love that brought them together could survive the pressures of a world that demanded perfection, compliance, and constant public engagement. And they had to decide how to respond, not just for themselves, but for the millions who were watching, analyzing, and forming opinions. But as the public watched, the couple knew that the most dramatic moments were still ahead. The leaks had revealed tension, frustration, and strain, but they were only the tip of the iceberg. Beneath the surface, decisions were being made that would alter the trajectory of their marriage and set the stage for an announcement that no one could have anticipated. And what happened next would shock the world, expose even deeper secrets, and mark the beginning of a chapter that would redefine Harry and Meghan's lives forever. When the world is watching, friends often become lifelines. They see the cracks before anyone else does. They hear the whispered confessions that never make it to the tabloids. They witness the moments of vulnerability that the cameras never capture. And for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, friends became both confidants and chroniclers, bearing witness to the emotional roller coaster of their lives, and in some cases, sharing glimpses of it with the world. Friends described a couple under extraordinary pressure. They were living not only as husband and wife, but also as symbols of a modern monarchy, of change, of public fascination. Every decision they made was weighed, analyzed, and criticized. Friends observed the strain this created. Meghan, they said, often felt isolated, battling both the institution she had married into and the glare of the media. Harry, for his part, struggled to shield her while managing his own emotional burdens, grief, family expectations, and the legacy of his mother's tragic death. One recurring theme emerged from these accounts: frustration. Friends reported that Meghan would often confide about feeling misunderstood, about how her voice seemed silenced in the palace. She reportedly spoke of subtle slights, of traditions that felt stifling, and of moments where even small gestures of autonomy were discouraged. Harry, meanwhile, felt caught between defending his wife and maintaining loyalty to his family. Friends say he became a buffer, constantly negotiating, mediating, and trying to prevent conflicts from spilling into the public eye. The emotional toll was visible, even to outsiders close to the couple. There were moments of laughter, yes, but also tears, tension, and arguments that could leave both parties shaken. Friends described quiet nights where the palace's grandeur felt oppressive, where walls seemed to close in, and where the pressures of public life weighed heavily on them. These moments were private, hidden from cameras and public appearances, yet they revealed the human side of a couple constantly portrayed as larger than life. Friends also revealed the difficulties in balancing personal and public lives. Meghan's desire for independence and advocacy often collided with institutional expectations. Harry's protective instincts sometimes clashed with the realities of royal protocol. Friends noted that disagreements could be intense, but were rarely about the superficial issues reported in the media. They were about fundamental differences in how to navigate a life under scrutiny, about how to reconcile personal happiness with duty and expectation. Insiders described a particular turning point. A confidant recalled a dinner where tensions boiled over. Private frustrations that had been simmering for months erupted in a conversation filled with raw honesty, emotion, and vulnerability. Words were exchanged that revealed fears of betrayal, feelings of isolation, and deep concern about how their lives would unfold in a system that seemed unyielding. The incident was never meant to be public, but it encapsulated the pressure cooker environment they were living in. Friends also revealed the toll that constant media scrutiny took on their mental health. Meghan reportedly expressed feelings of anxiety, of being constantly judged, and of having to fight not only for her marriage but for her voice and identity. Harry, meanwhile, faced a unique emotional burden: grief from his past, the responsibility of family legacy, and the challenge of protecting someone he loved deeply in an environment designed to limit transparency. Friends said that this combination of pressures led to moments of doubt, tension, and reflection that were profoundly difficult. Interestingly, some friends observed a pattern. The couple's moments of joy were often overshadowed by the very people meant to support them. Family expectations, palace hierarchy, and loyal staff sometimes became unintentional sources of stress. Small disagreements about schedules, appearances, or protocol could escalate because every action carried symbolic weight. Friends noticed how quickly minor incidents could snowball, creating friction that was difficult to resolve. The friends' accounts also highlighted contradictions in public perception. While the world saw a glamorous, composed couple, friends saw vulnerability, tension, and occasional despair. The contrast was stark. Friends described private conversations where Harry expressed frustration at the relentless scrutiny, and Meghan spoke openly about the loneliness of navigating a foreign system while under constant judgment. The disparity between public image and private reality was both dramatic and emotionally draining. Some of the most surprising insights from friends involved the couple's decision-making. Meghan's desire to advocate for causes and pursue autonomy sometimes clashed with Harry's desire to shield her. Friends reported that these clashes were never about love. They were about strategy, survival, and negotiating the impossible balance between duty and personal freedom. These discussions, often intense, revealed the depth of thought and emotional complexity behind decisions that the public often misinterpreted. Friends also played a critical role in mediating and offering perspective. Trusted confidants provided support, advice, and guidance, helping the couple navigate conflicts without escalation. They encouraged moments of reflection, urged patience, and sometimes served as sounding boards for decisions that could have long-term consequences. In essence, friends became a lifeline, helping Harry and Meghan survive in a world where every move could become a headline. And yet, despite the support of friends, the couple's private struggles inevitably began to leak into public perception. Observers noticed changes in behavior, subtle hints of stress, and moments of tension during appearances. Rumors and speculation intensified. Social media amplified every nuance. Friends became reluctant witnesses to the spiral of public scrutiny, knowing that each leak, each observation, each rumor added layers of pressure to an already fraught relationship. One particularly memorable account from a friend revealed the emotional weight of constant judgment. Meghan reportedly confided that she felt like her every action was a test, a measure of whether she was worthy, whether she belonged, whether she could survive the pressures of royal life. Harry, in turn, shared fears about repeating the tragedies of the past, about failing to protect the woman he loved, and about the impossibility of balancing personal happiness with public duty. Friends described the emotional intensity of these conversations as almost palpable, a mix of hope, fear, love, and frustration intertwined. And through it all, the public watched. Social media debates, tabloid speculation, and commentary from pundits amplified the tension, making private struggles public fodder. Friends observed how difficult it was for Harry and Meghan to find space to breathe, to process emotions, or to simply exist as a couple outside the spotlight. Every interaction, every decision, every argument was magnified, leaving the couple little room for privacy or reflection. Ultimately, Friends' insights reveal a crucial truth. The marriage of Harry and Meghan was never simple. It was a complex interplay of love, loyalty, ambition, pressure, and expectation. Behind the smiles and polished appearances were moments of vulnerability, tension, and struggle, moments that Friends witnessed and sometimes shared with the world. And these accounts, while personal and intimate, helped illuminate the reality behind the public image. But even with Friends speaking out, even with private struggles now hinted at in public, the most shocking revelations were still to come. The tension that had been simmering behind palace walls, discussed in whispers and private conversations, was about to erupt into events that no one could ignore. The world would soon see what happens when private pain collides with public exposure, and the fallout would be impossible to contain. Prince Harry is no stranger to pressure. From the loss of his mother at a young age to the relentless media scrutiny he has endured his entire life, he has been forged in the fires of public expectation. But even someone as resilient as Harry found the combination of personal struggles, marital tension, and institutional pressure to be an emotional weight unlike any he had experienced before. The leaks, the speculation, the whispers behind palace walls, it all added up, creating a storm of stress that few could fully comprehend. Friends and insiders reveal that Harry's emotional landscape during this period was complex and layered. On one hand, he was deeply in love with Meghan. Their relationship represented hope, a chance to build a life that balanced tradition with personal freedom. On the other hand, he was burdened by the weight of the institution he was born into, a monarchy that demanded loyalty, discretion, and adherence to rules that sometimes felt suffocating. Balancing these competing forces took a heavy toll. The stress manifested in subtle and not-so-subtle ways. Those closest to Harry noticed moments of tension that were uncharacteristic, flashes of frustration when discussions about palace protocol or public appearances turned into arguments. Friends describe him as wrestling with guilt. Guilt for not being able to protect Meghan fully from media scrutiny, guilt for the perception that he was failing in his role as a husband, and guilt over past family tragedies that had shaped his understanding of loyalty, love, and duty. Sleep deprivation became a common theme. The couple's schedule was grueling, filled with tours, appearances, and charitable commitments. But even in moments of rest, Harry reportedly found his mind racing, replaying arguments, analyzing interactions, and anticipating criticism. Insiders describe late nights where he paced quietly, trying to reconcile his private feelings with public responsibilities. The constant vigilance required to navigate royal life left him emotionally drained, yet he felt he could not afford to show weakness. Therapy and support networks played a critical role. Harry has been open in recent years about the importance of mental health, and during this tumultuous period, he leaned on professional support as well as trusted friends. He discussed not only the stresses of public life, but also the emotional complexities of marriage under pressure. While these sessions offered guidance, they also underscored the magnitude of the challenges he faced, challenges that were both deeply personal and publicly scrutinized. The emotional toll was compounded by the perception of obligation. Harry's sense of duty, to family, to tradition, and to the public, was constant. Every decision carried consequences, and he often had to suppress his own desires to meet expectations or avoid public controversy. Friends describe him as living in a constant state of negotiation, balancing his love for Meghan with his loyalty to the monarchy. The tension between personal happiness and duty created an emotional pressure cooker, leaving little room for rest, reflection, or relief. Media attacks and public judgment intensified the strain. Tabloids and social media were relentless, often portraying Harry as either a heroic defender or a failing prince, depending on the narrative of the day. Each headline became a reminder of the scrutiny he faced, and insiders suggest that this amplified anxiety, frustration, and occasional feelings of helplessness. The emotional toll was not abstract. It was immediate, personal, and exhausting. There were moments when the pressure spilled into private interactions. Friends recount instances of heated debates, long conversations, and even tears shared between Harry and Meghan. These moments were not just arguments. They were emotional releases, attempts to process stress, and cries for mutual understanding. But even these releases were shadowed by the awareness that the outside world might someday witness or interpret them. The need for privacy became almost obsessive, yet it was constantly under threat from media attention and internal palace dynamics. Harry's relationship with his family also contributed to the emotional weight. The prince has always maintained a deep sense of loyalty, yet the intersection of personal desire and family expectation created conflict. The struggle to reconcile his love for Meghan with obligations to the royal family was a recurring source of tension. Friends describe him as being torn between worlds, navigating complex emotional terrain where every choice carried ramifications both personal and institutional. The stakes were high because the emotional toll was not confined to private life. It influenced public behavior. During appearances, interviews, and speeches, Harry had to maintain composure while managing inner turmoil. Observers note subtle changes in posture, tone, and expression that hinted at stress, fatigue, and emotional strain. These cues, often imperceptible to casual viewers, were picked up by insiders and eventually interpreted by media and the public, fueling further speculation. Isolation became another significant factor. Despite being constantly surrounded by staff, advisors, and family members, Harry reportedly felt profoundly alone. The pressures he faced were unique, the responsibilities immense, and the scrutiny unrelenting. He could share some experiences with Meghan, yet even in marriage, the couple had to navigate their own emotional landscapes while contending with external pressures. Friends describe moments when he felt the weight of the world pressing down, unsure how to reconcile love, loyalty, and personal well-being. The leaks, public speculation, and palace conflicts created a cycle that intensified emotional strain. Every private disagreement could become public fodder, and every public appearance carried the risk of misinterpretation. Friends suggest that Harry's resilience was tested constantly, requiring extraordinary emotional energy to maintain both public composure and private authenticity. The duality of living as both a royal and a husband created a uniquely stressful environment, one that few could endure without emotional consequences. And yet, Harry continued to strive for balance. Friends note his determination to protect Meghan, advocate for her autonomy, and navigate the pressures of royal life with as much grace as possible. He sought moments of reprieve, even if brief, and tried to create safe spaces within the palace where the couple could connect privately. These efforts, however, were often complicated by the ever-present scrutiny, institutional pressures, and the ongoing leaks that threatened their privacy. Perhaps the most challenging aspect of this period was the awareness that the couple's struggles were not entirely private. The world was watching, analyzing, and judging. Every emotional response, every decision, every moment of frustration or vulnerability risked becoming a story. Harry had to manage not only his own emotions, but also the perception of the world, a daunting and relentless task. And all of this set the stage for a breaking point. The emotional toll on Harry, compounded by the strain on the marriage, the relentless scrutiny, and the leaks, created a situation that could no longer be contained. Decisions that had been delayed, conversations that had been postponed, and tensions that had been simmering beneath the surface were about to explode, leading to moments that would shock the world and redefine the future of the royal couple. But what came next would push Harry and Meghan into uncharted territory, forcing choices that would change their lives forever and send shockwaves through the monarchy and the media alike. Meghan Markle entered the royal family with grace, confidence, and a clear sense of self. She was a modern woman, accustomed to independence, career achievement, and public scrutiny in her own right. But the monarchy is a world unlike any other, a world of centuries-old protocols, invisible rules, and expectations that often contradict personal freedom. For Meghan, navigating this environment proved to be far more challenging than anyone had imagined, and her struggle became a central chapter in the unfolding drama.